Hello, it's me, Mario. Woohoo! You watching GRTV, my favorite. Wahoo!
Sitting down in a comfortable sofa, always nice after walking so much here at Gamescom. But now we're here with David from Vigil Games and from the team behind Dark Millenium Online, Warhammer 40K MMO. And during E3, more or less all we got was a trailer, and I grilled your colleagues, and all I got was watch the trailer. But you're actually making some stuff official here at Gamescom, and that is...
The main things we're talking about today is, first of all, our first playable race, which is the Imperium Man, which I know is a big shocker. Everybody's probably sitting down right now because that was a big revelation. But one of the classes in the Imperium Man, first of all, there's going to be more than one race in the game, and each race has its own distinct classes. And one of the example of that is the first class we're announcing, which is a Black Templar Space Marine. And that's one of many Imperium classes that will be revealed over time in addition to all the other classes.
What kind of class? How will you be using the Space Marines in the game? What kind of class will they be?
The Space Marines are, they kind of vary from chapter to chapter. So in this particular instance, the Black Templar are, they have all Space Marines are awesome super warriors. So if you imagine there was a warrior class for the Imperium, it's definitely the Space Marine. But in addition to that, Black Templar have a tendency towards melee weapons, and they still use bolters and that kind of stuff. So that's their particular flavor of Space Marine.
Well, bear with me if things get too 40K nerdy here, but isn't a Space Marine for a player? Aren't they a bit unapproachable? If you understand what I mean, they're superhuman, more or less 3 meters tall, and gigantic armors.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely been a challenge because in the 40K universe, most people will never ever even see a Space Marine. I mean they're super elite, super elite guys, but we've worked really closely with Games Workshop, and those guys are great, and you're when you're dealing with them, you're dealing with the guys that worked on the original IP, so everything they say is pretty much gospel, and they've had a lot of really creative solutions that we can use in the game, and it's stuff they feel that doesn't violate the IP and makes sense. So I think when people see how it's treated in the game, they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Can you give us any example of that?
How Space Marine? Well, I mean, the other cool advantage of the Black Templar is that they, one of the few chapters of the Space Marines where they actually have trainees in their fighting companies with them. So it gives you a chance to start out at a lower level. You can start out as a neophyte and kind of work your way up to that iconic image of a guy in power armor. So, you start out as more of a scout and work your way up. And it was a good opportunity because they're one of the few chapters that do that.
Of course, now you can't answer more playable races or playable classes, but do you plan to, similar to another Warhammer MMO, Warhammer Online, the kind of mirrored classes between the various races to make an even balance? Any thoughts like that on Warhammer Dark Millennium?
Yeah, I mean we're taking the approach of mirroring it per side. There's 2 primary factions in the game, so it's not necessarily mirrored per race. The idea is that the sides are balanced, but the actual composition within each individual race may actually be different. So, there may not necessarily be a Space Marine equivalent in another race. Obviously, no other race has Space Marines.
Chaos Space Marines?
Well, yeah, there are some.
Are there Chaos Space Marines in the game?
They're still humans, right? No other race has Space Marines, but yeah.
So there's Chaos Space Marines, playable characters.
They're in the video.
That's true. There's a lot of stuff in the video. Vehicles? Now we're dealing with stuff in the trailer, so I'm not as nerdy as some people.
Totally talk about the vehicles. So vehicles are a huge part of the game. Every race in the game has their own set of vehicles. I mean, if you play the tabletop at all, you could probably extrapolate what's going to be in the game. We're trying to cover each race as comprehensively as possible. I mean, there's going to be bikes and speeders and tanks and flying and skimmers and all the stuff you imagine from the tabletop. And the vehicles are treated as A-class citizens in the game, and they have full physics. They collide with each other. You can multi-crew them, so you and your four buddies can jump in a tank, and one guy can drive, and the other guy can shoot, and the other guys can arm the sponsons, and it's it's a really important aspect of the game, and we're really kind of going all out on that. And you know, in addition to all the battleground vehicles, you can also get your own personal, like motorcycle, depending on your race. Obviously, a Space Marine will get a Scout bike earlier, and then later on a Space Marine bike. But you know, each race has its own version of that sort of ground transport that they can zip around the world in. So it's a really big part of the game.
But one thing that really haven't been talked that much about so far is, of course, it's always hard to put a label on a game. But do you think that Dark Millennium Online is more of a PvP game at heart?
I mean, PvP is a big aspect of the game, just because it's 40K and it's a big aspect of the IP. But we want there to be a pretty good balance of both. We don't want it to one to necessarily dominate over the other. And that's, you know, one of our objectives is that we want people to feel like they're a person in the 40K universes. And you know, sometimes you'll be on a battlefield and there's tons of those, and that's a big aspect of the game, but not always. You might be in a city, you might be exploring some Chaos Temple. I mean, we wanted to give them a broad range of what it's like to actually live in the universe and not just be a soldier on the battlefield all the time.
So a lot of crying, a lot of depressed people.
Well, you play Heroes of the Universe. Those people are around you, but you yourself are. I mean, Space Marines don't cry, so no.
Definitely don't cry. And they trample on the poor, depressed people. Indeed. Except for perhaps the playable characters, Chaos Space Marines. Who knows? But one of whose name, of course, escapes me when I'm sitting here because I'm too tired and we've been working for 2 days straight. But one of the top guys at THQ mentioned in an interview or at somewhere mentioned that the game he felt played a lot like World of Warcraft, and that people that came in from that game would feel at home. Is that anything you want to comment on or can comment on?
Sure. I mean, that's partially true. I mean, we've kind of taken, there's two aspects to an MMO, right? There's like the high-level social and progression systems, you know, leveling up, getting abilities, guilds, groups, all that kind of stuff. Totally have all that. It's an MMORPG. But I think the one aspect where that's not true is the moment-to-moment gameplay. And, you know, WoW is very traditional MMO, a million icons on the screen, you know, pull mob, wait for patrol, rinse and repeat for 500,000 hours, and that, you know, that's the game in a nutshell. But our game doesn't play it out like that at its basic level. It's much more action-oriented. It's, you know, right off the bat, it's much more heavily based on guns, which pretty much necessitated that we throw that model out the window because, you know, guns and that type of combat model just aren't that fun or interesting. I mean, if you put a gun in a WoW character's hand, it's just kind of boring. It's nowhere near as cool or compelling as, you know, what you'd find in an FPS or any other game where people have figured out how to make guns awesome for the last 20 years. So it's definitely, at that level, it's different. Like, it'll play differently. And, you know, hopefully when people can see that, they'll get a better idea what I mean. But that's pretty much it for now.
Obviously, obviously, you guys are busy trickling out the information, releasing small pieces of the puzzle here and there. When can we expect more? General time frame. Preferably a set date.
I don't have a set. Even if I knew, I couldn't tell you. But I don't know. But I know that very shortly, and I think we're targeting towards the end of the year as sort of a first look. So not too long, months.
Okay, that'll do for now. All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.